Okay, g'day folks, welcome back to Kieran's Training. So today we're going to have a look at duty of care. Big part of all high risk licence assessments, and it's also a big part of pretty much any course that you do nowadays. So what we're going to do is we're going to just try and break it down into some simpler terms, make it a little bit easier to understand. Because at the end of the day, everyone on the job site does have a duty of care, and it's pretty important to understand what that actually means. Okay, so on the screen here I've got what's written in the WHS Act. Although I do work in Victoria, the WHS Act and the OHS Act that we work under down here are pretty much identical when it comes to duty of care. Slight variations in a little bit of wording here and there, but the crux of it is pretty much the same. And what it all boils down to is safety. So we've got to make sure that everyone on the work site is safe, and we all have a role in doing that. Okay, so when we look at our primary duty of care for the employer. Okay, so when we're talking about the employer, under WHS Act, the employer is referred to as the person conducting a business or undertaking. So if you see that terminology, it essentially means the employer. Okay, so we'll take a quick look at this. All right, so a person conducting a business or undertaking, i.e. the employer, so far as reasonably practical, must look after the health and safety of the workers engaged or caused to be engaged by the person, and workers whose activities in carrying out work are influenced or directed by the person while the workers are at work in the business or undertaking. Okay, so that is saying that everybody on the job site must be looked after, as well as anyone else that may be affected by the work being carried on in that workplace. So it's not just in the workplace itself, but also next to it, or those sorts of things. So if you've got a footpath outside, make sure you put a gantry or something along those lines. Make sure not just people on the work site, but those that can be affected by the work that you're doing as well. Okay, so how do we do that? So we're talking about the duties of the employer to start with. Okay, so we'll come down here and it says, without limiting subsections 1 and 2, a person conducting a business or undertaking, i.e. the employer, so far as reasonably practicable, must make sure of the provision and maintenance of a work environment without risks to health and safety. So, put bluntly, that just means they must provide a safe workplace. Okay, now the rest go on to say how are they going to do it. So, the provision and maintenance of safe plant and structures. So all the structures are safe, so if you've got scaffolding up, it's going to stay up. Okay, if you're working with any cranes, they're in a good working condition and good working order. So all the equipment, all the structures are in a safe and well-maintained condition. Okay, the provision and maintenance of safe systems of work. So that means all the policies and procedures are there to look after the health and safety of everyone. So you'll find all your workplaces will have their work instructions, their standard operating procedures. You'll have SWMs for any high risk work, that's a safe work method statement, as well as JHAs, JSAs, JSCAs. They're all risk assessment tools, and they'll also have things like environmental policies and all that sort of thing. So all that paperwork based stuff, all their procedures, all their policies are going to look after the safety of everyone on the work site, right? To try and reduce that risk as much as they can. Okay, then we go down to the safe use, handling and storage of plant, structures and substances. Okay, so that's telling us that when we're talking about substances, etc., if you're working with any chemicals, they're going to be stored correctly, that you're going to be provided with the correct PPE to use it, you'll be taught how to use that PPE. So it's going to make sure that everything you do with the handling of those substances is going to be safe. As far as the provision of plant and structures, right? So, for instance, if you're going to be using equipment that's got moving parts, make sure it's all well guarded and all that sort of thing as well. Alright, so they're responsible to make sure all that sort of stuff is taken care of as well. Then we go down to the provision of adequate facilities for the welfare at work of workers in carrying out work for the business or undertaking, including ensuring access to those facilities. So that's going to include things like making sure you've got adequate amenities such as toilets, etc. You're going to have access to potable water, okay, all those sorts of basic needs that we need at work to keep ourselves safe and in a good condition. Okay, this next one here is pretty important, alright, and I do find it does sort of get neglected a little bit on some sites, which is the provision of any information, training, instruction or supervision that is necessary to protect all persons from risks to their health and safety arising from work carried out as part of the conduct of the business or undertaking. So in a nutshell, what that is telling us is that if you're given a task that you're unfamiliar with, it is up to the employer. He does have a responsibility to make sure that you do understand the task and how to achieve that task. Okay. If you are operating a machine that you're unfamiliar with, he needs to make sure that you're properly trained in that machine as well. Just because somebody may have, say for instance, a C6 license, he may know how to drive a 60-ton lever inside and out, may know everything about it. If you go and throw him in a 55-ton Grove, he's going to be like a fish out of water, alright? They are completely different, so before you do jump from one machine to another, make sure you do understand the workings of that machine. Okay, so that's pretty important that you don't just try and wing it. Make sure you do have a good understanding, a thorough understanding before you operate that machine. Okay, and down the end here, that the health of workers and the conditions at the workplace are monitored for the purpose of preventing illness or injury of workers arising from the conduct of the business or undertaking. Okay, so what that essentially means is that if you're in a environment where there may be fumes, there may be bright sparks, all that type of thing, right, that the procedures are in place and they are monitored to make sure that they aren't adversely affecting the health of the people doing the job. Okay, so if you're working with chipboards, or if you're in a surfboard factory, or if you're in those sorts of things where you've got all those particulates and all that type of stuff, alright, you've got to make sure that the health is monitored. Okay, so you'll find if you do start on a lot of projects, they do put you through a physical, so they get a baseline of where you start before you actually go on site, and that way they can monitor if there are anything adversely affecting you along the way. Okay, so that's just a basic rundown of the employer's duty of care. Alright, so to put it simply, the employer's duty of care, alright, he's got to maintain a safe workplace. He must provide safe systems of work. He's got to maintain plant and equipment. All right. He's got to provide adequate facilities. Okay. He must provide information, training, supervision, or instruction, and that he's going to make sure that all workers' health are monitored on the work site. Okay. So that's just a quick rundown of the employer's duty of care. All right. So now we'll take a look at the employees. All right. So that's you and me and most of us out there. Okay, so keep in mind everyone does have a duty of care. Okay, so a little bit short of this one, but it is pretty important that we do make sure we follow it. Okay, so duties of a worker. So first one is to take reasonable care for his or her own health and safety. So obviously when we're working, we don't want to be cowboys, we don't want to take shortcuts. We want to make sure that when we do things, we're doing it safely, so we're not going to injure ourselves. Okay. We must also go down to B, take reasonable care that his or her acts or omissions do not adversely affect the health and safety of other persons. So that is saying that if you've got other work crews around you, or you're likely to have interactions with the public, all right, that your job isn't going to affect them or put them at risk. Okay, so where it's talking about emissions, make sure you put up things like barricading and all those sorts of things to make sure that everyone's looked after and nobody puts himself, you don't put anybody else at risk either. Okay, now comply so far as the worker is reasonably able with any reasonable instruction that is given by the person conducting the business or undertaking to allow the person to comply with this act. So essentially, if they ask you to do something in order to maintain compliance with the Act, okay, so far as you're reasonably able to do it, it's always a good idea to do it. I mean, they're not doing it for fun, they are doing it to make sure they look after the health and safety of everyone on the site. Okay, and if we go down to this last one, so cooperate with any reasonable policy or procedure of the person conducting the business or undertaking relating to health or safety at the workplace that has been notified to workers. So essentially, if you're given a work instruction, a standard operating procedure, all those sorts of things, make sure you do follow them in the way they go. Okay, if they say to put certain controls up, make sure you put those controls up. Now, I don't like telling people to blindly follow procedures like that. What I will say is, if you are doing a task and you can see a safer way of doing it, it doesn't mean it's up to you to just change it. It's up to you to bring it to your employer and see if you can get those systems changed so you can look at doing it in the safer way. You can always see things from a different point of view, but they could be doing it the way they are for some other reason that you can't see at the moment. So if you do see a safer way, well, don't blindly follow it, but you can bring it up with your safety officer, safety rep, the supervisor, manager, whoever, whatever the case may be, and have a discussion about it, and maybe you can look at getting procedures changed so it is done in a safer manner. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown of duty of care. So you are going to come across it in any of your high-risk licensing, okay? And you will also find in the majority of most other courses you do, whether they're safety courses or whatever the case may be, okay, you will come across it a fair bit. Alright, so hope that helps a little bit, and thanks for your time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to keep up with some more videos, okay? And thank you.